Robin Stewart, Planning Committee.
Aaron Shaw, Planning Committee.
RJ Harvey, Planning Committee.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Committee.
And I guess I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Andrew Blumenthal, and my pleasure to chair the planning committee. Now to staff around the dais as well.
Alicia Osborne, Planning.
Zanya Duhaney, Planning.
Kathy Cornett, Planning.
Erin Henson, Planning.
Jason Pauling, Planning.
And then Tim, would you guys like to introduce yourselves as well? I can bring the mic over here. Jane Barker, so we have one right here.
Planning.
Jane Myers, Tree Charlotte.
Bart Landis, Catawba Lands Conservancy and Carolina Thread Trail.
Commissioner Donald.
Teresa McDonald, Planning Commission.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Bart, Jane, especially thank you guys for coming. We're looking forward to hearing from you. First things first, do we have any questions, discussion on the minutes from our last meeting on September 19th? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Commissioner Gaston, I make a motion to approve the minute.
Commissioner Shaw, second.
All right, motion by Gaston, second by Shaw. In favor, say aye. Perfect. We have 4 mandatory referrals this evening. Assuming you've all had a chance to go through them, do we have any that we would like to pull for further comments?
I do have a question on one, if that's permitted.
Yeah, let's go. We can ask a question. If there's no additional comment, we can still go through and approve them all.
No, okay. On mandatory referral 23-39, just wanted to understand the disposition process for the 1400 North Graham Street property. Sorry, I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be asking.
Do we have anybody from?
Yeah, we actually don't have anyone here from CMS and Jason, I don't know if.
Yes, an exchange. Sorry.
Up here.
Again, I don't want to speak for the school. I'm with planning, but it's an exchange for I forget the Yellowstone is the new office building that CMS wants to use, and they're exchanging with the Bar Association for the Graham Street property. The only comment we got at Joint Use Task Force was the Graham Street property is a historic property, so they'll have to disclose that. And anything that comes with development regulations regarding that is a historic landmark. So that has to be coordinated with the Historic Landmarks Commission.
Thank you. So the intent is to market it for sale to the public.
It's actually an exchange.
So the use of, sorry, so just so I understand, the use going forward of 1400 North Graham would be?
It would be an office for the, I guess it's the Mecklenburg Bar Association. So it would be an office building.
Okay,
Yeah, and Commissioner Shaw, my understanding, so the building at Yellowstone Drive was formerly marketed for sale.
okay,
And I believe that the Board of Education has identified that as a suitable office for them and are exchanging so that the bar associations will move into Graham Street, Board of Education will move into Yellowstone. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
it does. It's just not entirely clear in here that they were going to be taking the use of that property, but.
And if we do have any questions that we would like for the school board, we can put those together and get feedback after.
Yeah, if it's possible to just clarify the use of the 1400 North Graham property, just to confirm.
Now, would you like to wait until we get answers to
No.
vote on that mandatory referral?
No, I don't have an issue with it.
Any additional feedback, comments on the mandatory referrals? You have any comments on mandatory referrals? Anything you'd like to pull? All right, great. In that case, I believe that we can go ahead and vote on all 4 at once. If we can get the language on the screen, that'd be great. Motion would be fantastic.
Commissioner Gaston. The planning committee reviewed mandatory referral reports 23-37, 23-38, 23-39, and 23-40 on October 17th, 2023, and have no additional comments for the submitting agency.
Rhodes, second.
We have a motion by Gaston, second by Rhodes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Well, we are very excited to have two presentations this evening. First by the Catawba Lands Conservancy with Bart Landis, followed by Jane Myers with Tree Charlotte. I believe we're all set on the presentation and good to go. Perfect. Well, Bart, thank you again for coming, and we're excited to hear from you and learn more about what you do and how we can help.
Thank you for having me. I feel a little odd talking about planning with the planning committee, but we have 88 municipalities in our footprint. And not all of them are as well versed as you. And so this presentation was originally done to help some of them understand what we do, but also why we do it. So I'll go through all that. Please, as I go, if you have questions, go ahead and ask the questions, because I'd much rather speak to what you have an interest in than what you don't have. Saving land and connecting lives to nature. We have two functions. Our conservancy function is saving land. Connecting lives to nature is our trail function. And we try to pursue both of those things together as much as possible. Next slide, if you would. If any of you have lived here for very long, you have lived through this, but many have not lived here since '76, and so haven't seen as much of this as others. Our growth is fantastic. It has brought us all kinds of economic development. It's also a little frightening because it looks kind of like a metastasizing cancer coming at us. And so what we want to do is to grow as well as we can. Next slide. We want to grow. I don't know about you. I've lived in a town that was static enough that I moved away because there were no jobs. And so plain and static is not what we're after. We like the growth. We want the growth. But we also know that the growth is going to force us into choices, and we want to make good ones. When I speak to some of these other folks, what I'll say is it's either death by 1,000 cuts or success by 1,000 good decisions. Because again, 80 municipalities and each one making separate decisions every single time. So there's lots to be done to get this stuff, but we know that these choices will define us and define our region. The point of all this is we want really good quality of life. And you have probably seen what I have seen. People move here because they get transferred here from New York or Philadelphia or Dallas or whatever. And they come just grumpy as they can be. I hate it here. It's nothing like where I came from. I wish I was not brought here, but I can't wait to go back home again. And then 3 years later, they're told they have to be transferred back, and I am not leaving. And it happens over and over and over. And it's because their quality of life here is so good, and they prefer here to where they were. But it took them a while to figure that out, because we don't have Mount Rainier, and we don't have the ocean, and we don't have a river close by. We have a river, it's not so close. So they had this thought that we're just plain Jane and there's nothing good about us and all that. And then they get here and they realize how good they have it. Well, those people keep coming and coming and coming. So the projections are we're going to add another 2.5 million people. So we got to get ready. We got to make good choices. Go ahead. One of the other things, I've lived here, if you count my time going to college, I've lived here for 41 years. And one of the other things that has been sort of remarkable, well, my sister moved here 1 year before me, and we used to joke that this was a great place to live, but you wouldn't want to visit here, the opposite of the old saying. And that was because when we moved here, there really wasn't much to do, but it was a great place to live, great place to raise your family, all that kind of stuff. Now there's a whole bunch of fun stuff to do, but again, because there wasn't that defining feature, there wasn't that thing that says we're this or we're that or the other. Everybody had a hard time figuring out Charlotte. And if you traveled, you know that when you say Charlotte, you'll get Charleston. Or if you're in Europe, you'll get what? And it's because there really isn't a defining feature of Charlotte. But what I'm trying to get everybody to recognize is the defining feature is the quality of life. That's who we are. That's what we have to sell. And we want to continue that and make people proud of that. One of the interesting things about, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a place that's really pretty, really nice. And there was some pride of place in that location. And Charlotte has had a hard time sort of developing that idea that we're Charlotte and we're really proud of. What? When I was first here, we were really proud of getting a football team and getting a basketball team and that kind of stuff. And this is not to denigrate those things, but that meant we were just like every other one of the top 30 metropolitan areas in the United States. They don't have football teams, they don't have basketball teams, they don't have baseball teams. So it was nice, but it didn't distinguish us. So what is it that we have that others don't have? Again, quality life. Go ahead, please. One of the things about being a part of an environmental organization is that you frequently are sort of stereotyped as the people who say no. You may not, you should not, you could not, you did it wrong, all that kind of stuff. And we don't really want to be those people. What we want to be is the people who help us do things as well as possible. And we believe very sincerely that you can have conservation and growth, and that we should have conservation and growth. There are ways to do that. Again, this is what you do in your daily work. But we push really hard for folks to recognize that we aren't the naysayers. We're the ones who are helping things do well. Next slide. The other thing that we frequently point out to folks who again think that we're there to save all the trees, and that would be great, but that's not really our purpose, is to point out the economic benefits of green space and trails. And they're very substantial. I'll show you some data on trails in a minute that is really well compiled in a form that's easier to handle. But the economic benefits of green space are basically who doesn't want to live next to a park. And what that means is that your home values go up, your tax receipts go up. The other thing is, if you think about the sort of benefits of conservation, they're if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they are the baseline, because clean water, clean air, that's about as basic as it gets, and that's what you get out of green space. But you also get these economic benefits, but you get health benefits because of those basic ideas. And then last but not least, if you think about what's an area you think of as prosperous and what's an area you think of as really having struggles, what do they look like? The prosperous area probably looks green and pleasant, and the non-prosperous area probably looks gray and difficult. And you know, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't think those things are important, you know, chat with the people in Flint, Michigan, about what it's like to not have clean water. Go ahead, please. So I just had to put up the Lorax because you know, he's sort of necessary for environmental groups. But the trick with this is we're not speaking for trees, we're speaking for people. And you literally are healthier, wealthier, wiser, and happier around green space. We're in green space. And there's a lot of research on this. Clean water and air, incredibly important to health. If we have a high quality of life, people will move here, our economic growth will continue to increase and all that kind of stuff. If we have a low quality of life, gone. This wisdom one, this is particularly personal to me. I have 4 kids. I grew up in a fairly rural area. I had lots of green space to play in and lots of trails. I was a runner to run on, all this kind of stuff. I'm here. I tell my children to go outside and play, and my wife just smacks me and says, "Don't you ever do that again," because of how dangerous it was because of traffic. When I grew up, I could walk or ride my bike pretty much anywhere. Here, I wouldn't let my children ride their bikes, at least not on the street. You know, the backyard isn't much for a bike ride. So the trail system, especially, but also parks as well, are places where children can learn, they can have fun, and they don't even know they're learning about it. They accidentally learn about trees, and they learn about the natural processes of things. And then lastly, there's a lot of research now that your mental and physical health both rapidly, immediately improve when you're in peace. Okay. All right, so this one is a little snarky, but I'll say that the Romans were really good at this. That's 2,000-year-old infrastructure. It still works. Those aqueducts still bring fresh water, clean water, and you can walk up to that fountain, scoop the water up and drink it. 2,000-year-old infrastructure. Well, I don't know if our trails will last 2,000 years, but it's infrastructure. They are permanent infrastructure for our citizens, and it's a legacy for us to leave to them. And that's same thing is true for parks. Think of what we would be like without Romare Bearden Park, or Freedom Park, or any of these places that people go to all the time. That's infrastructure. Go ahead, please. And last but not least on the planning part, none of this is new. If you're familiar with Savannah, people love Savannah. It was laid out in 1733. These concepts have been around for a while. And everybody has known them, they hadn't always engaged in them, so they've been around. Go to the next one and I'll show you how people have been thinking about this stuff in long foresight ways. These two examples are great. Does anybody know when Central Park was opened? The answer is 1854. After New York City had quadrupled in size in the prior 30 years. They had the foresight to say, gosh, this is, people are crammed in, they're not happy, we need a space for them to get into Central Park. And New York would just not be the same without Central Park. Second one is the Appalachian Trail. Same kind of deal. A guy had the idea in 1921. And it took a couple decades to pull it off, but now we have this infrastructure that's so important. Go ahead, please. This one is more personal to us here. This, believe it or not, is in Huntersville, not near, in Huntersville. And there are a dozen landowners, all of whom put their land under conservation easement, and they're all contiguous. So it's now 800 acres of green space in Huntersville. And this guy, Frank Bragg, was the one who was the leader in all of that. And Frank says there's two kinds of land. Land that is under conservation easement and land that will be developed. That's it. And he's worked really hard to make this happen. So they have been thinking independently. There's governmental efforts, but these are just willing landowners who've all said, we're going to do this. So 800 acres. Go ahead. This one, more snark, actually, but this guy, William White, is an architect. And he talks about how, it's not that hard to design stuff that people like. What's remarkable is how frequently we do it badly. So on your left, that's Millennium Park in Chicago. And if you know that story, that was built over top of a railroad. So it used to be pretty nasty, made that out of it. This is just an anonymous communist block set of apartments warehousing people. And how unpleasant to live in that space. Go ahead. So here's today's quiz. On your left is Charlotte coming in from Gaston County, so from the west. And that's what it looks like. Gorgeous. On the right, take a guess. This is a United States city. Only one person has ever gotten it right and happened to formerly live there. This is Oakland. Okay. And here's what you need to know about Oakland. Oakland's a very large city. Once was prosperous. It is now losing population. And along with that, back to what you're proud of, they are losing their football team, their basketball team, and their baseball team. All three are moving out. So, careful what you wish for on the growth scale, right? Or how you grow is probably a better way to say it. So here's what we do. That was all about, why this stuff is important. We have a vision to have 85,000 acres of green space with 1,600 miles of trail. And that sounds wildly aspirational. But if you go to the next slide, please. We have 17,000 acres under management, and there's 23,000 acres of parks in our footprint. So we already have 40,000 acres that are preserved in one form or another. And then on the trail side, the trail is relatively new. It started in the depths of the recession. It started in 2008. But we already have 400 miles of trail on the ground and another 100 miles of what we call Fluway, which is just places where you can public put in and take out for canoes and kayaks. So we're actually well on our way toward those highly aspirational goals and think we can get there. Go ahead, please. So here's why we do it. This drinking water, water quality is one of our biggest things, and that's how we got started. We were actually started by a bunch of people who were worried about Mountain Island Lake, and they started preserving land around Mountain Island Lake. There's now a good bit of preserved area there. So water quality is important. As we go to the next slide, this is why. This is an area called Johnson Creek, and this is the mouth of Johnson Creek coming into the Catawba. And the water intake for 1.1 million people is right here. And that plume of sediment is coming from something you can barely even see in that picture. It was an area that was logged. So it was bare, and then there was a really heavy rain. But it's also exactly what happens when we have heavy development with impervious surfaces, and the runoff is just so fast and it just wears everything out. So that's our water quality problem now. Sedimentation is number one, but the second is what's in the sediment. Herbicides, pesticides, chemicals, various things of that sort. So it's important to have that drinking water. To go to the next slide, we've also worked with some folks, RTI is a consulting firm, to try to show how much does it cost to clean water when we have incidents like that last one, or actually not incidents so much as constant. The answer for that prior situation was $11 million. So what we're trying to show all these municipalities is that when you're doing development, you know that there's an economic benefit to the development. What you're maybe not fully recognizing is the costs. Roads, schools, water quality. These various things. Before, there was no way to put water quality into dollars, and we figured out a way to put it in dollars. So we're working on all that as well. Go ahead, please. So tree canopy, the tree canopy preservation program is a fantastic thing. This project, by the way, is a TCPP project. The TCPP got it and put it under conservation easement so it cannot be developed. One of the nice things about tree canopy, besides the fact that it literally cleans the air, is it also cools the air. And this project in particular is next door to a very dense area, relatively low income, that doesn't have other green space, and so it's pretty useful for that purpose. You go to the next one. And the clean air, if you look at, it's hard to quantify all this stuff, but if you look at what does a tree do, you can quantify how many tons of carbon does it sequester, how much particulate matter does it take out of the air, how much nitrous oxide and sulfur oxide does it take out of the air. But you start multiplying that across a forest, and it's really hard to get your arms. But the fact of the matter is, and Jane will, I'm sure, go hard on this in her presentation, trees clean air. And if you think we're kind of past all that, that's not an old picture. That's 2018, when we had both a bad ozone day, actually it was bad ozone week, and we had wildfires in the mountains. Do you remember that? When the smoke was coming over from the wildfires, and those two things together made that. So we're not out of the woods. Excuse me. Go ahead. So we're now trying really hard to move from conservation to restoration. And here's the distinction. Conservation tends to be buy it, hold it, leave it alone. The issue in the southern Piedmont, where we are, is that essentially everything was changed for the last 300 years between homes, businesses, and excuse me, roads and other impervious surfaces, and agriculture. Between all those things, almost everything was changed very dramatically. There's very little sort of native stuff, and if you doubt that, one of the stories that is important to this project and this photo is that when Andre Michaud, anybody knows who Andre Michaud, he's a French botanist, and he came here. It was important to people in our business because he came here in the late 17th, early 18th century, and just wandered all about because he was collecting plants. He actually got very wealthy taking azaleas and rhododendrons back to Europe. But his journals established what it was like pre-colonization, because he was here long before most of the settlers came. And he talks at length about the prairies that in savannas that he traveled through. And the reason for that is that in his time, not only did we have deer, but we also had elk and bison. And they would graze and they would keep things in meadows. And the indigenous peoples here were smart enough to recognize, look, there's all our food waiting for us there. And so they would actually burn in order to create meadows. And so between those factors, we had lots and lots of what he calls savannas. So we're trying to reestablish those grasslands that you go to the next one. So we lose all this grassland, we lose all the various things that grow in the grasslands. Keep going to you. Including not just the plants, but the animals. There's lots of ground nesting birds that no longer are around here because there's no place for them to nest because we mow everything. Or it's forested, one of the two. And so that's a big change. And if you that's, by the way, that's the Schweinetz's sunflower, which is an endangered species, but it exists here. We've been propagating it and trying to put it in this grassland. So the next one you get. This is just one of those dull things. If you don't have meadows, you don't have a meadowlark. And really basic stuff. Did any of you grow up in an area where you could hear bobwhite quail? No, nobody did. They have a very distinctive call. It sounds like they're saying bobwhite, bobwhite, bobwhite. So if you heard them, you know. But the trick is, since I moved here, I've not heard them. And it's because we don't have the habitat for them. But there's other kinds of quails and whippoorwills, all kinds of things that are ground nesting. And you have to have the spot for them to do that. You also lose bees, butterflies, all these other things. So if you go to the next slide, this was a really big win for us. This is the Catawba River, but just a little bit to the west on the south fork of the Catawba River. We own and manage a property, and it had one of those great big huge rights of way, 100-foot wide. And the protocol, and if you've worked with engineers, you know that they like protocols. The protocol was to plant fescue, which is a non-native grass, and then mow it. And we started talking to them about how about if we, on the property that we own, how about if you allow us to plant native plants? And we went round and round on that for a while, but they let us do it. And it completely changed the ecology of that area. Because two things. One is that the native plants die back, so they didn't have to mow. So they saved money, so that was good for them. But the native plants also hosted all those insects and butterflies and birds and all that kind of stuff. And within 3 years, they all came back. And so that whole area changed, and Duke, to their credit, got excited about it. And they said, let's do the whole of this section. Well, it's 11 miles. And so we're going to need a lot of help from them because we don't have quite the staff that they've got. But the nice news is that they got a lot more than that as well. And so if this continues to do a good job of helping both them and us, then we'll keep after it. So lots to come, but we're excited about that. These are some of those natives. That's a swine and sunflower that comes out. Go ahead. So the connecting last nature trail piece, we the CLC board decided that because many of our preserves are not open to the public, it was really important to have a facility that would be open to the public that would get people out into the main spaces. So that's where the trail was going on. This is the trail network, and this is why we have 88 municipalities. It's much bigger than our conservation footprint. It includes 15 counties. Those highlighted trails are what we call our priority corridors, and they're not a priority because we think they're more important. That's where most of the activities are occurring currently, not exclusively, but currently. And what's nice is when they're done, each one of those is more than 100 miles, and so they'll connect up a whole lot of great stuff. But also will be a great spine off of which all that other stuff can branch out. So when the board said we should have trails, we wanted to get people out, but we also thought it would encourage more conservation. And this is our case study and how that has happened. It's done really well. This is Danielstowe Botanical Garden down the south end of the South Fork River, right at Lake Wylie. Up at the top, that orange blob is Spencer, or actually surrounding Spencer Mountain. That was the property I was telling you about that had the big right of way on. But all of the green and orange in that, orange is owned by the county, the green is owned by us, it's all preserved land. And there's 3 more parcels that are coming into that. So within 5 years, we're gonna have 25 miles of trail connecting Spencer Mountain to Danielstowe Botanical Garden and 3,000 acres green space. And it's because when you walk on the trails, you want to, you don't want to walk next to a car. You want to walk in the green space. So it's turned out really well. Go ahead. This, I'll tell you about trail benefits. These are all the many benefits, and they are many. But if you go to the next, we had a study done by the Institute for Transportation Research and Education from NC State. And we had 6 of our trails examined, and they were looking for the economic impact of those trails. And we very intentionally took some trails that are urban, some that are suburban, some that are rural, so we could see the contrast. And these are all the various ways in which there is economic benefit from those trails. You can see some are dollars from income to the people who are working around them. Some are health savings from the people who are using them. Some are tax revenue to the municipalities in which they are located. But what's most remarkable about adding all that up, if you go to the next slide, it's $3.5 million per mile per year. So across our 400 miles of trails, that's $1.4 billion of economic impact on an annual basis. And just an example so that you won't get overwhelmed by that number, because it sounds like such a big number. There's a place, have you ever been to Goat Island in Cramerton? It's a nice park. It is an island in the river. And it has both the thread trail, walking trail, and the Blue Way right there at the island. And so it's a great spot to be involved in all kinds of activities. Well, there's a little coffee shop there called Floyd and Blackie's. And Floyd and Blackie's sells coffee and muffins, and now they also rent kayaks. And so that's part of the economic impact that's in that study. Stuff like that where people say, gosh, this is an opportunity. I need to seize on this. And so that's in there, as well as just when you go out, you're healthier person. Go ahead. So this is why you get a social return, you get a financial return, and most of all, I told you I have 4 kids. I now have 1 grandson, and I want my grandchildren to come visit. That's my fondest wish at the moment. And if they have these wonderful places to go outside and play, then they can do that. Without that, my wife will slap me again and tell me to leave me alone and I'm not sitting outside. But that's our great thing. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very, very much.
Well, I know you asked questions throughout the presentation. Also, I'm not sure if you had the chance to meet since you began your presentation. Our chair of the Planning Commission, Douglas Walton, is here as well. See, we're drawing all kinds of important people tonight to see. But no, I would imagine looking around the dais that we have some questions for you. If it gets too long, we'll make sure at the end of this, just to clarify, is this presentation something that we can share as well? Oh, I didn't know if it was proprietary. That'd be great if we could share a copy of that as well as your contact information for any questions that come up after this. But starting with Commissioner Stewart.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is the Carolina Thread Trail. How is that being funded? And related to that, how is it being sort of integrated with the existing Parks and Rec Greenway system in Charlotte?
The funding is 2 different types. One is just annual funding that helps us keep things running and helps our staff stay employed, all that kind of stuff. And that's just almost all individuals. There are some corporate, some foundation, a little bit of government, but mostly it's individuals saying, we like this, here's some money. But we also have project funding. And that comes in multiple ways. We have conducted a couple of capital campaigns to do projects, but even more, there's a good bit of government money from various sources that comes for that. And then the municipalities themselves often will fund, usually with other matching sources. So we opened a trail 3 weeks ago, and there were 6 layers of financing in that effort. We had kicked in some, 2 municipalities had kicked in some, a county, the state. There's just a whole bunch of stuff in there. So it's patched together as a short version. Not already forgotten the second question. The greenways. How they fit in, yes. Each county adopts their own map for how they want the thread trail to be a part of their efforts. And so in Mecklenburg County, it's a pretty extensive network. And they choose when and where they wish to have it be part of the thread trail. But for the most part right now, the money that is being allocated for that is for the thread trail routes. And that's because, again, back 10, 12 years ago, they sort of designed it that way. It's not because our job is to make sure everything fits together. Our job is not to tell everybody where to go. but how it all fits together. And then with these small towns, how to get it done.
Anybody else?
I have a question.
Commissioner Gast?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. So I have a question. You showed a map and it had like an orange line going through, and you said that you all tried to make those trails go over areas where they were used and utilized. Is that pretty much
It's actually where they're being built
built?
more
Okay.
than utilized, but yeah.
Okay, built more than utilized. So I've looked at the trails and things like that, and they're lacking in some areas. How is it determined? You said something about the county. So does the county determine where they acquire land for these trails?
That's pretty much it. There's more nuance, but that's mostly it.
Okay, and when you say the county, what what department or what part of the county? Is it the county commissioners or who?
It's eventually, it is the county commissioners. It
Mhm.
depends on the county. Mecklenburg is the most populous.
Mhm.
It has the most robust systems.
Mhm.
And they actually have folks within county parks who do nothing but trails. So
Okay,
they begin and then it goes up through parks and it comes to the commission. In these other counties that are smaller, it's just some of these counties are so small, they don't have a parks department. They have a sort of a general facilities department. And so with those, it's much more, there's a decent amount of public input generally, but it's also pretty much the commissioners.
so does the county commission, do they listen to you all if you have suggestions? And the reason I say that because, so I live in the Crescent and there's very little trails, parks, things like that. And so one of the things that you said that stuck out to me was, values of homes and the quality of their air is so much better. And the Crescent is one of those areas where the air quality is horrible. The property values are substantially less. Well, they're changing now, but substantially less than other areas. So how do you in turn try to turn that around to say, okay, let's build some trails there, or let's have this, who is the person or the,
Let me give you sort of two sides of that.
Okay.
Because we've worked on that a good bit. One is, you probably know about Cross Charlotte 2 Trail,
Mhm.
and that's the. Let me back up. Little Sugar Creek Trail is great, and it was easy. They did the easy one first. And the reason it's easy is that there's a sewer line that runs all along there, and it was already graded. They already owned it, all that kind of stuff. So they had the construction costs, but no other costs, no land acquisition cost, no grading cost, any of that. So they did the easy one first. The trick with Little Sugar Creek is it mostly goes through wealthier neighborhoods. And everybody noted that.
Mhm.
Cross Charlotte 2 will actually, it roughly goes from the Whitewater Center across to Mid Hill, roughly. And so we'll mostly go through those relatively lower income neighborhoods. And the park department, the folks who work on trails know that, and they're working on that. They don't own a lot of that land.
right?
And so it's a much more difficult proposition. However, or maybe also, we worked really closely with the Lakeview neighborhood for a while.
Mhm.
And you may know Jamal Kennard, who's a leader in that neighborhood, and Jamal gave us a little bit of a very kind talking to.
Those of us who know Jamal know a little differently, but okay, go ahead.
He was very nice about it. He said, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mhm.
you're coming in here saying you're bringing this great thing, and we're saying we want the ambulance to show up. And we would like our roads to be improved and, some really basic stuff. So, maybe that's good, maybe it's not. And the maybe it's not part is that back to home values rising, there's a gentrification issue. Fortunately for Lakeview, they have about 60% ownership of home ownership, so not absentee ownership. But even in those homes, most of their home ownership is retired folks who have fixed incomes. And so it's a yin and yang thing, and it's really difficult. And we can't solve that problem. What we do know, though, is that like with other types of parks, this park would be something that would be beneficial in many ways.
Thank you.
And quickly to piggyback on that, just one question I had. We're very fortunate with our commission, the 8 members around the dais right now, to have kind of a wealth of background, knowledge, expertise. Commissioner Gaston is specifically, very tied in with a lot of neighborhood associations, as are other people sitting here as well. What is one of the best ways on a community or neighborhood scale to engage, whether it's through the Land Conservancy or the Thread Trail, to have more input, have more feedback, and be able to get more involved?
The map's an easy one, but the map only comes up occasionally. They get revised, but not that frequent. They are, or at least in the past, have been public processes. We rely on, like I was telling you before, willing landowners. So if folks know landowners who would like to participate in either the trail or conservation, that's great for us. Because we don't have condemnation power. It's either given to us or we buy it. That's all there is to it. And so somebody who's willing to take part in that would be fantastic. So any kind of knowledge along those lines. For existing trail, we rely very heavily on the people who get out and use it. They say things like, this tree fell over, somebody needs to come clean it up, or I don't know, gosh. We have one person who not only walks the trail and picks up trash, but weighs it, and every year tells us how many pounds of trash they picked up during the course of the year. So they just get out there and they do stuff. So participating is part of it, but the knowledge part is a big thing.
Thank you. Any other questions around the dice? Commissioner Shaw.
Just one question. Thank you. That was really informative. As you all collaborate with city and county divisions, I know there's sort of the Tree Save Fund that has sort of its own mandate, and then Parks and Rec with its long-term park plan. Do you all collaborate with each of those groups on their plans, and do you feel like it's feasible that there's, I guess, a partnership or a collaboration where everybody's sort of moving in a similar direction in terms of the goals?
Yeah. Yes and no. The no part is that they've got all kinds of things that they got to do and all that kind of stuff, and so sometimes we're ignored. But the yes part, TCPP, like I was telling you in the presentation, frequently when they get a property, we'll put it under conservation. And that's so that they are assured that it will never be developed. Because if the county's holding it, it actually could be developed. But if it's under conservation easement, it can't be. So that relationship is really good. The other one is with the park system. Excuse me. Sometimes we'll get a property and then transfer to them. Sometimes they'll get a property and put it under conservation easement for the same reason that TCPP does. For their nature preserves in particular, they don't want it to be converted to something else later. So we will work closely with both of them. Again, they're in Mecklenburg County, those are large, complex organizations. In these other counties, well, let me give you an example. You know what Great Falls is? Great Falls is about an hour south. It had a textile mill. It actually the first dam on the Catawba was at Great Falls because there are falls there. Anyway, the textile mill left in the 60s. So unlike some of these other textile towns where they left in the 70s and 80s, this textile mill left in the 60s, and that little town just fell apart and is really struggling. They had the good fortune to be the recipients of some work that Duke was required to do under the relicensing agreement. So there's an island right before the falls. That island is going to the state as a park. There's a bunch of boat docks that are going to get put in. And last but not least, Duke was required to change the dam configuration to allow controlled flow on the falls. So all the kayakers and canoers are going nuts because you can now go on the Great Falls. Our role in that is that there's a rail segment that went to the mill, and they purchased and converted that to a trail. And their whole staff is 5 people. The town's whole staff. We have 5 people who do nothing but trails. And so we were hand in hand with them the whole way, about 3.5 years of working on that. So that's an example where we're kind of doing it and giving them credit. Here's the opposite, which is they can do it without us, and we just try to offer advice and be helpful every way we can. Thank you.
Anybody else? I guess I just have one more, and then again, thank you for sharing your contact. If anybody has questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out. But while our interests may spread far and wide, our purview is the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. And I guess this pertains more to the Land Conservancy side. But is there kind of a minimum threshold for an easement? You know, obviously knowing there's smaller parcels, landowners in Charlotte often have to weigh, you know, the sustainability value versus selling to a developer or for the real estate value, right? How does that play in Mecklenburg County?
It's a great question, and we're actually currently doing some strategic thinking about actually being very different in Mecklenburg County versus the other counties in the way that we do things. Long ago, we had a policy that our minimum was 100 acres. Well, that fell to 40 acres the last time it was revised, and of late in Mecklenburg County, we've been working really hard to take 10, 15 acre parcels, or even smaller if they're contiguous to our existing conservation areas, simply because there's so little of those larger portions. One of the things we're also contemplating is a conservation easement. For those who don't know about it, conservation easement is essentially a sale of certain rights and property that you give up. So I own this property and I hereby give to you the development. That lowers the property value, you get a tax deduction. So it's attractive to landowners for that reason, and also because it keeps things green and the landowners want that. It is because you get a tax deduction, it's regulated by the IRS. We used to only do conservation easements, and we're now beginning to contemplate, well, there are other kinds of easements. We don't have to follow the IRS rules. We can do other things. And so both size and also differential types of work. And the most, right now, one of our most exciting examples, it's a really small parcel. It's less than 10 acres, but it's in a highly urbanized area, and we'll probably take it and put it under some kind of easement, maybe a conservation easement, maybe just no, we own the rights to that, you can't do it, whether there's a tax deduction or not. So I'm sorry, it's a complicated answer, but we're thinking about lots of different things.
No, I appreciate that. I think we have conversations with Parks and Rec, our urban foresters here, you know, about in the city of Charlotte, sometimes you have to take what you can get and get creative to make it happen. Well, again, Bart, thank you for your time. That was fantastic, very educational. Look forward to hearing from you soon. Next up, we have, and excited to welcome Jane Myers, the Executive Director of Trees Charlotte. What I anticipate will be a very complimentary presentation to what we just heard. Jane, would you like us to hold questions to the end?
Yes, I guess so.
Perfect. All right, well, we'll let you take it from here. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you. So how many people have heard of just heard of Tree Charlotte? We'll just start with the name, brand recognition. That's wildly different than what we know to be true out in the community. So that's really good to hear that. So I will try to speed through some of the slides since y'all have a good understanding of, or a basic understanding. This is largely introductory on our different types of programming, so because you specifically asked about that, but I do want to get to questions. Those are actually more fun than just talking at you. So we'll go on. But this is our staff. Just wanted to meet the team because it's a fun way to show all the folks that are a part of our mission and what the different ways we're kind of trying to approach our work. So we have a community educator, an arborist, a community engagement manager, obviously the fundraising and marketing pieces. We do, I couldn't even, 20 Saturdays in a planting season. So y'all know when the planting season is for trees in Charlotte? Yeah, I didn't know that. I was in this job 2.5 years ago. So North Carolina's planting season is October through March for trees. It doesn't mean you can't plant trees outside of that, but it's better for their health to plant them when they're dormant and sleeping. And it's kind of ironic because that's when people aren't thinking about them because they look like sticks, just without leaves if they're not evergreens. But So we'll do 20 Saturdays of events during a planting season. Sometimes there'll be 1 and 2 events. We used to do 3. We kind of tried to dial that back a little more. So a lot of event coordination that goes into that, and that doesn't even include things we'll do during the week. So it's a pretty busy time. And then we're very fortunate to have a great partnership with the City of Charlotte, and we're growing our partnership with Mecklenburg County. But Frank Sardes is our community forester, who he basically just helps us do all the things that we need to do within the community as a subject matter expert from being an arborist and sort of thing. So lots of work. So I think you guys know this, or guys and gals, it's urban trees matter. And Bart talked a little bit about the different ways that they help us. They clean our air, they help lower power bills or energy bills. They help with stormwater runoff. And Bart mentioned the where you have a bunch of cement and such, like it can run, like it will just run down the street instead of being absorbed. So the more trees we have, the more we can help when we have these big storms that we've started having. Protecting biodiversity, animals need a place to live, and we need animals. They cool communities, which is so very important, particularly with the urban heat island effect. Is that something folks are familiar with in here? Okay. So temperatures can be 10 and 20 degrees hotter where there are less well-treated communities. So it's really important to plant trees, and particularly for Charlotte. We'll get into that. I'll show the slide that shows that. But they also improve mental health. People drive slower on streets that are tree lined, which shocks me if you think about how people drive. Our streets are so well tree lined in Charlotte, and I'm 6 to 8 miles slower supposedly, and I don't know what it would look like around. And they increase property value. So they really do matter, and that's our focus, is the urban trees. But we also believe trees help. We can build communities through trees. Within communities, if the community is well treed, it reduces crime. So vandalism, graffiti, different. It really there's studies that show lower crime rates and aggression. Like I said, you drive slower, but it also makes you want to be outside more and lifts your spirits. There's research that shows that as well around well treed and green areas. And like Bart mentioned, there's a lot of economic benefits that come from trees. This is data from the 2017 Urban Forest Master Plan, but looked at what the different types of ways that we are helping our city financially from having a pretty rich urban forest, which we do. We're very fortunate to have such a great urban forest, and that's why we're here. We want to continue to protect it. I'm going to disagree with one thing Bart said. I think Charlotte does have a hallmark and something that is known for. I think it's known for the trees. I worked in corporate America before being in nonprofit, and everywhere I traveled around the country, and even sometimes out, if you said you were from Charlotte, people go, "Oh, the city with all the trees. Oh, it's so green," and then talk about if they ever came flying in, what that looked like. So that always gave me a great sense of pride, and that was a recollection that happened time and time again. So when I was interviewing for this job, I was really connected to that. Like, you want to be a part of preserving that for our city of Charlotte, because it created such a sense of pride. So that's our obviously Tree Charlotte's position on that. So the last canopy assessment study that we did was in 2018 data. That had us at a 45% canopy coverage. In this country, best in class is considered like 40% or more. So we were doing well at that time, but we had a loss. So we had a loss of between 2012 and 2018. But the data at the time showed us we lost about 0.5% a year. Went from 49 to 45. But we're looking forward to a new assessment that is underway, and hoping that we will have a report in the next month to share, hopefully in November-ish. I'd love to go into Thanksgiving with new data that tells us where we are today. It's going to be different. The process for that, we hired a different vendor for it this time. It's got AI generated learning. It's different scientific data process. So it'll be interesting. But we're real excited about, and you think about how much technology just changes year over year, and that almost being a, 4-year change of data, it's gonna be cool to see where we are. Sorry, I can't share that today, but I'm looking forward to learning.
You're always welcome back.
I will come back after we have a new presentation this year. So where is loss occurring? Our research that we partnered with, in addition to beyond what the study had told us, with Doug Shoemaker, I think, came back and shared that the 60% of the loss that occurred around, really it was 67, was 2/3 of the loss was residential. But of that loss, which surprised a lot of people, right? Because people want to blame the development and whatnot. It is inclusive of, if you buy 50 acres and clear cut and put up 200 tract homes, that is residential, but 60% of that loss, we were able to discern that it was due to storm damage, natural mortality. Trees are living things, so they have natural lifespans as well. And then public safety with whatever type of right of way needs might have existed. And then 40% of that was attributed to infill and development. So new development, redevelopment is usually how I phrase it. But a lot of that has to do with people think their one tree doesn't matter and that one tree does. So if you go to the next slide. This is just more of a fun graphic. This pictures on the left of the old age are literally from Charlotte when we originally planted them in the early 1900s. In Dover, if I recall correctly, the weather changes due to natural causes. And then pests and diseases as well. So y'all remember the banding and you probably heard about emerald ash borer, I think it's how you say it. And then invasive. So we love that little picture because everybody loves ivy. They think it's so pretty, but it actually kills trees and chokes them out. It's not very healthy. It kills park walls too and things like that. So these are some of the natural causes we're aware of. And then this is a slide we like to share just to kind of show with the infill development. So if you wanted to put in a circular drive, like this is the same property, it's harder to see. What's actually probably easier to see because it's leaf off, meaning you can tell the trees are there without any leaves on them. But you put in a circular drive or you expand your home or you put in a pool. The 1 or 2 or 3 trees you take down feels like it doesn't matter, but that counts for a large portion of the tree loss that we have. And like I, for instance, live in South Park, and that is just happening left and right. The ranch comes down and the McMansion comes up, and they get as far as they can to the line that they're allowed, and then one great rental in the front yard or something like that. And it has a compounding effect. So we mentioned earlier, I was getting a sneak peek on some of the canopy disparity that we're familiar with. Again, data from a while back, but you can see the chart on the left shows our tree density, our canopy density. And the chart on the right shows income, again, it's from 2018, but how income levels vary. And you can see the density of the trees also follow income. So what we want to do, I think you can go to the next slide, is try to focus on our mission I think everybody here knows that, but is to grow, diversify, and steward our iconic urban forests, but also to educate people. And our kind of tagline that what we seek to do is build community through trees. And our 4 pillars are they're really the action words I pull out of our mission, which I usually talk about: grow, diversify, care, steward, and teach. When I came in role, we were really good at growing, diversifying, had great reputation for our adoptions. Plantings are so much fun. But I really wanted, that was good. So I'm going to work on growing our care program and teaching efforts, because if people don't know about us, then how can we help preserve our canopy? So those are our main pillars. I put in the different types of events because we talked specifically about what we do. Tree adoptions is what we call them now. They used to be called tree giveaways. We put about 5,600 trees into the community every year through adoptions and plantings. Around 70% of those are giveaways. So where that matters is where you saw the loss. Almost 70% of our loss was on residential property. So it follows that getting trees into the hands of resident owners can help correct or reverse some of that where that loss is actually happening. So we love our adoptions. They're a lot of fun. typically sell out our citywides in like 30 minutes. It's really very interesting. And we have added in a layer of targeted registration windows. So a citywide would just open to everybody, like the season opener, which was September 30th, opened that Monday before. And it really 800 trees sold out in 30 minutes. It was crazy. This last adoption we had was we tried to target zip codes, and this year we were trying to let them register in advance of opening up citywide, just to make sure we're giving away all of our trees that we plan to give away. And it didn't quite sell out, but that's what we're trying to do now, is making sure we're getting all the trees out to the community in a fair basis. We also do a couple of Crescent targeted zip code adoptions, so you get advanced registration, first pick, if you will, for different types of species. And we have one this weekend at Canopy Builders. Yes, this weekend, because a lot of people want to pick the pretty flowering trees, and those are important. Diversification is one of our cornerstones of our mission, which is diversification of species, right, and age. But we really want to make sure we're getting Canopy Builders back into and that would be like the big oaks, you know. And if you think about how we were originally designed, where the like a Queensway West is the example I always use, all those trees were planted, same tree species, same age. And that's going to be a problem in a few years when they all kind of hit their tenure of life. But those are important trees to have. So we try to give them away as well. Community woods is when we partner with different communities. So like a civic organization, a church, literally neighborhood association can come and reach out to us, and if they have they have space where we can do a planting, where we do that. We do it with schools. And so that's just our way of trying to get both adoption and planting. It's more fun to put the trees in the ground. We have a little more sureness that they are going into the ground. So we like doing this, and people love volunteering for this. So the community woods are very important. It includes schools, the CMS schools as well, where we get to do a fair amount of plantings. And that kind of combines with tree days, like when we do plantings, like at a school, for instance. We used to be able to do 200 and 300 and 400 tree plantings when Tree Charlotte got started. And I think we have one 200. No, I think we have one 200 tree planting this season. The rest are 50, 37, 76. You know, it's the game has changed because land is such a premium, and there's less land to just plant trees. So we're trying to get creative on what that looks like. But that partners with our community woods, and I brought that up because our schools are typically our biggest planting opportunities. But then tree care was something that we focused on growing this year or last year. So when we do a planting, like the 1,200 trees we're going to put into the ground, let's go back in a year or 2 years and check on them and see how they're doing. The trees we plant aren't like little seedlings. For those that don't know, we do trees that are a couple years old, typically. That means they have a little more established root system, so they'll do better when they transfer, but not so established that they're going to be traumatized. And that was funny when I first was in this role too, that trees do get traumatized. So it's important to be mindful of that. So we usually say it takes 5 years to plant a tree and 15 years to grow, because it's a good 20 years before it's going to really be, you know, casting a big shade for us. So going back to where we had done plantings, like the tree care work is important because we can also do train pruning. We've started a program called Tree Keepers, and those folks volunteer. And if you help the tree grow the right way, it needs less care down the road. And that's one of the things we're trying to be mindful of, is not creating an expensive problem for people in 5 and 10 and 20 years. And that can't be entirely managed, but it can certainly be lessened with the right care up front. And then Tree Resilience Initiative is new. This is an exciting thing we started in May. Tree Resilience is really a way, what we came up with, like, hey, let's do a holistic approach. Let's do all of the education stuff we do, all the plantings and adoptions specific for our community, but over 3 years, so that we're, you know, doing trust-based, you know, relationship. We'll work with them, because all the feedback we've gotten from communities is, or varying communities, is that if you don't, in the lower canopy and underserved communities, if you like Bart was talking about, like you're worried about having the roads paved correctly or access to grocery stores and coming in and saying, hey, let's plant a big oak tree that you're gonna have to spend $12,000 down the road, you know, or $5,000 to prune is not being responsible. So wanting to make sure we're partnering, addressing what people really need with their trees, and we're part of their community, becoming a part of the community, that building community through trees, versus it being, we're gonna tell you what you need and then we're gonna leave. So that we started piloting with McCrory. I can get the next slide. This is more, we'll just skip through. This is just what I've already talked about. And more, okay, so tree resilience. So we started piloting it with Ramblewood and McCrory Heights. The percentages are what their canopy coverage was. Probably the last time their survey was done, our assessment was done in 2018, but wanting to kind of build relationships. We're doing like quarterly events, like different types of education opportunities, meetings, fun stuff as well, just to make it, you know, a relational approach instead of transactional. And we're hoping to, it's going pretty well. McCrory Heights a little more so than Ramblewood, but we are learning a lot in a pilot year, as you do, and are hoping to add a couple more communities in probably this coming March timeframe, I would guess. But continuing, you know, the 3-year commitment with the communities. But it includes everything we do, the engagement opportunities. We do our tree, we invite them to do on tree walks to learn about the different types of trees, different types of education opportunities, the front yard tree planting. So we literally are going to go plant in the front yards of the residents that want us to. We'll do an adoption for those that want to plant in the backyard. And then going back, you know, every 6 months or so to check on how it's doing. We'll remulch after a year, and after 2 years, do a little train pruning, like I mentioned. So and then also mature tree care. So that was something we heard a lot. I don't want to plant a new tree. I'm scared this tree is going to fall on my house. Because like we talk about, a 35-38% is less than our best in class. But this also tells us that it's a very established and mature canopy, right? And so we want to make sure we're being thoughtful again to that age diversification and helping preserve what we have, because that can certainly serve us better in the long run. So if, you know, we did a pilot program on the mature canopy care for a couple years ago with Revolution Park, and basically helped about 19 homes that had income of, well, they met like a federal funding program. That was kind of the easiest way without the administration resources, as a small little nonprofit with 4 staff members at the time, that we could figure out how to do it. But spent like $40,000 on mature tree care, and it was pretty impressive. Like the biggest one, I think, was a $9,000 that we had to remove. But there was also work that was, you know, $250 or a couple $1,000, not for aesthetics or, you know, but for if there's a risk. And that was truly working with certified arborist companies that came in and helped us do that work. But I share that to kind of demonstrate like how expensive that can be. And if a person is a homeowner and that's their greatest resource for them, for their family, from a financial investment perspective, and it's at risk of a tree falling on it, you know, we want to make you don't have to get rid of the tree. You can just give it the right love it needs. So this has been really fun and exciting for our team. And again, we're learning a lot. But that's one of our newest staff. And these are just our goals, building community through trees, like we said, but the overall help, trying to change people's relationships with trees. I think there's definitely a big fear factor. We hear that over and over. I don't want to fall in my house, or I don't want to fall on my baby. And that's everywhere in Charlotte. That's not community specific, that's city specific. But a lot of that's just awareness and education. You know, I did the same thing when I bought my first house. And it was right before this, it was right after 6 months after a big ice storm had come through. It was in 2003. Those were here back then. And all these oaks came down, all these trees, so much problems. And so I was scared. I'm like, I need you to call a reputable arborist company. Fortunately, I need you to take down this tree. I don't want to fall in my house. It's the first house I've owned. I was so scared. And they were like, please don't do anything. I'll come back in 5 years and maybe take some limbs out to keep it light. And, he's like, this tree's perfect. Don't do anything. And it was such a good lesson for me because since they were reputable, they were there caring about the tree, right? And our community. And so that kind of always stuck with me. So if we can educate other folks in that same way, of just, taking the fear out a little more and making it more empowering for everybody. Those are our goals overall, but certainly with tree resilience. And then you'd ask specifically about projects. So this is kind of, we talked about the adoptions, those are the different ones. The different neighborhoods that had signed up, it takes anywhere from 4 to 8 months really to plan a planting, if you can believe that. So a neighborhood would reach out to us. We did Stafford, Caldwell. Let's see, that was the first week, October 7th, I think. But we've been working with them for a while, and you have to get the arborist out to do plans and make sure it's the right tree in the right place. That's very important to our work. And then we get volunteers and get sponsors because it's expensive to do plantings. Our estimates are around at least $250 a tree, just rough estimates, all in cost to us. Same with school plantings. And then we also are fortunate to have a great relationship with Park and Rec, who is helping bring us out some more. And we started trying to put our toe outside of city limits a little bit, because I've heard that feedback, like one that's going to be greater. That is one of our bigger planting areas is when we do go outside of city limits, but also that benefits everybody in our city, right? So the North Regional Park Rec Center will be, I think that one's like 120 trees if I remember correctly. So we're trying to see what that costs more if we do stuff outside of city limits, but again, we want to keep trying to be creative. There's a couple schools that are outside of city limits as well, trying to broaden our reach and our partnership with Mecklenburg County. And I just wanted to call out the education outreach component because I said that was a pillar. We did a perception study this past spring that told us, like, we thought it was less than 5% of Charlotteans knew about us, and we still kind of directionally use that, but this perception study said 3% of Charlotteans were familiar with, like, acutely familiar with the Tree Charlotte organization and the massive tree loss that Lisa's saying. So with our city, we share, it's the 3rd fastest growing major city in the country now. This time last year when I was doing this presentation, it was the 5th, so it's really growing, as Bart has talked a lot about. So we've got to educate people and we've got to inspire them. I would be willing to bet most everybody would say one of the reasons they moved here in the top 2 to 5 reasons would be because of how green it is and all the trees, and they love it. And then we just need them to be a part of helping us keep it that way, because that's why they wanted to be here to begin with. So with our outreach staff, we'll do tabling events, presentations like this, go to different classrooms, summer camps during the summer. And then we started growing our tree walks, which are really just being out in the community and spending an hour with folks walking around talking about trees. It's pretty fun. I highly recommend them. And these are our stats to date, like at the end of last planting season. So we're fiscal year, which works well because of the planting season being October to March. When we finished up all of our tree planting and stewardships this past April, because I'm including the tree care stuff, we kind of do that all year round now, but it was almost 5,600 that we had planted or distributed. We went back and stewarded over 2,000 trees, which was significantly more than we had done in the past, more than double what we had historically done. And then we had 68 different species. So we do native and naturalized trees. We really are trying to encourage natives specifically, but you have a tree like a ginkgo that's been here since the 1700s. And it does well here. And those are actually really good hardy urban trees. Like they survived before the dinosaurs died. So there's evidence they were here before that. So just as an example. But yeah, and we did a seedling planting and we give away seedlings, again, trying to raise awareness. You can grow a seedling in your house for a couple of years before it would need to be transferred. These are just the different touches. And then overall, we're over 54,000 trees in our tenure in partnership with the city. And we were founded in 2012 or incorporated in 2012, I should say, for those that don't know. But yeah, it's been a really great impact, and we're gonna keep growing it. And this is one of my favorite little pictures. I don't know which, I guess, I do know which angle it's from, it's in the stadium, but yeah, like, that's why we're here. Trees are Charlotte, so. That's my presentation, I think.
Well, Jane, thank you very much. And, you know, speaking for everyone around, we will make sure that more people know who Tree Charlotte is and what you do.
Yes,
Try and
thank
get that
you.
up above 5% for you.
That's our
on-
50 is 50%.
There we go. There we go. On that note, does anybody have questions for Jane?
That's great.
You want to start? All right, Commissioner Gaston, go.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I was glad to hear about your initiative. I read that somewhere and I've been trying to go back and find it. I was like, I know I saw, and here you are.
Okay, good.
So I was gonna ask you about it, but you already explained about it. In the area that I'm in, of course, I'm in the Crescent. And so I would like to connect with you potentially so we can
Great.
do
yeah,
some work
love
in
to
that
do that.
area. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's good. Oh, where can I find out more information about? Is it on your website? More
Yes,
specifics
I'll
about that
give you my
program?
card, and
Okay.
we'll get together with Joy. She organizes, she's our community engagement manager.
Okay,
So she will plan, she works with the neighborhoods to, or whomever who's coming to us to help get plans underway. So
she's probably, is her last name Mayo or something?
it is, yeah.
That's probably who sent that email out. Now I know where to find it. Thank you.
And same question I asked Bart, is it okay if we share this presentation with the commission and then also your contact information?
Yeah.
All right, fantastic.
Info at Tree Charlotte, y'all can put my email.
Perfect. Thank you. Commissioner Rhodes.
Jane, thank you for your presentation. My daughters and I participated last year in I think it was Ridge Road Middle School. It was in our neighborhood for their Girl Scouts. And so I will tell you, it's quite hard work. You guys worked those little 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. They were definitely tired, and the mamas. We were all definitely tired, but it was fun. It was great to get out there and get in the dirt. But my question is, so I live in a mature canopy home that's surrounded by that. It really scares me, but I wanted to know, do you, when you talked about the mature canopy conversations and initiatives, do you have those conversations in subdivisions that have, a majority, like mature canopy or neighborhoods that have that? Because I would be interested in having a deeper conversation about that, or being more educated about my trees. Because, I always have this fear, like they're going to hit my house one day if something happens. And so, and with that fear comes, I just want to chop it down. If I chop it down, then it doesn't affect it. But I like the feel of it, so do you have any of those, or can you request those for small areas? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have just the one certified arborist on staff who is largely devoted to educator and arborist to working on our tree plantings and plans and educational outreach opportunities. She's not track certified. I don't want to get too tech, but so that's a different higher level of certification that you would. So what we tell people to do is to call a certified arborist. Just make sure that they're ISA certified arborist. We have 5 companies that we've worked with in the past, so I'm comfortable recommending them because of that are on our website. So I can send you that link too. But basically, as long as they're an ISA certified arborist, I would deem them trustworthy. In North Carolina, you don't have to be an arborist to have a tree service company. You can just slap Jane's Tree Service on your truck and then just go and cut them down. And the danger around that is, this is why we push people to use certified arborists, is even if they just do like tree trimmings or thinning out limbs or something like that, that's how disease can get into the tree if it's not done with the right technique that certified arborists learn. And then you really do have a problem. So you think you're doing the right thing, and understand, I try to make decisions for affordability as well, but and everybody should, but a lot of these certified arborist companies will come out and do free estimates and give you that assurance of what what was truly needed. That's the other reason why I recommend that. So a lot of companies will like top trees and you're not supposed to do that and things. So it's important. That's what we mostly tell people. We don't have we don't have a separate fund. We just have the work that we do overall. So I do know that that's important. We recognize that and we hear that a lot. And we, want to help be a part of the solution as best we can. And that's the ways we can do it right now. So yeah. And I always tell people at our tree plantings, like, it's so much fun because such a consumption society, right? Like I always use this joke, like I saw an orange in a plastic container in the grocery store. And I'm like, oh, if only nature had created a container that kept that orange clean, we wouldn't have to put it in a plastic, and when you go out and do a tree planting, even when I did it with my 14-year-old stepson, like we both left, like we had really accomplished something that day and eat a lot because we were hungry. So yeah, thank you for your question and coming out.
Anybody else? Questions for Jane? I really only have one. You answered the majority of things that I'd written down. First things first, Trees Charlotte, is your region just the city of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County?
It's almost all the city of Charlotte. Like we're just starting to branch out in the past year or so. But so we get a lot of in-kind support from the city. And so when we do things outside of city limits, it costs a little more, but we're figuring that out. We started corporate partnerships in an effort to, go where we can plant trees. So we are doing more of that. We just haven't, it's just not overwhelmingly structured, and adoptions are all city residents.
Do you have any contemporaries in the other municipalities in the region?
Trees Davidson was founded by the first ED of Tree Charlotte, in fact. So wonderful man, Dave Cable. He founded Davidson Land or he works there. It's folded together or something. I've been contacted by Matthews and Huntersville that wanted to start their own trees, which we are totally like, we'll get on the phone, we'll talk you through what we know of how to do it. But we also want to get to where we can go into those communities because that's important to grow our reach. I don't know that we would be a trees mech one day, but some of my board members would like to do that. If you want to talk about BHAGs, but yeah.
No, and then the only other thing in terms of partnerships with other city and county entities, right? Whether it's Parks and Rec, whether it's our urban forester, is that something that is a big part of what you do? For example, when the mandatory referrals at the beginning of our meeting today, right? A lot of times those are acquisitions of floodplain land.
Right.
And a lot of times after that's acquired, you see the tubes in the ground. Is that you?
Those, the tubes in the ground are typically Charlotte Stormwater. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm leaning on Tim. Tim's a great partner. No, we haven't gotten brought into that because they do that. I will go anywhere people want me to plant trees. That is our biggest pain point as an organization is we have we're so limited on our planting opportunities. What my hope is, again, in the BHAG as we continue to evolve our relationship and being so closely partnered with planning is at some point we want to be at the table with developers and saying, hey, you have your required trees, let us do the 16 to 20 or whatever the percent might be, because we're all in this together and we want what's best for our community. That's kind of the dream. And I think we're well positioned to be able to do that one day. But we also got to have more staff and funding and support and to be able to grow like that.
Understood. Well, as a commission, last year we established an environmental and sustainability subcommittee that is now a permanent standing subcommittee. So something that we keep at the forefront of our decision making as well. And again, if we ever have questions or if we ever have other ways that we think that we can work with you, we will absolutely be in touch and please do the same. So,
Thank you.
But thank you for coming. Thank you for your time and your presentation, and have a great.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, Kathy, I believe we are on to the CAP update, right?
So Erin and I were just gonna give you an update. Aaron's gonna talk a little bit about kind of where we've been, some of the data that we've collected and analyzed around where we've been, hearings we've been touching, kind of where we are, and then I'll talk a little bit about where we're going in the next phase.
And then I'll just briefly at the end, give a quick overview
yeah.
of the Northeast Middle and Outer.
Okay, so as many of you have heard, this is just a refresher, but the community area planning effort will provide more detailed guidance for Charlotte's communities, and it's a really important part of the city's planning framework, which ensures all planning efforts are aligned and aimed at realizing our vision. As you've likely heard as well, concurrent with comprehensive plan development, Charlotte combined and updated its development regulations into the Unified Development Ordinance. So the planning framework and development regulations work together to make our city more equitable for all and are our blueprint for growth. Excuse me. So community area plans build upon the guidance included in the comprehensive plan and provide a more community level guideline for future growth and development. And they're very similar to the small area planning effort that has been completed in the past with the city of Charlotte. But they'll include recommendations for place type changes, mobility, capital facility improvements, as well as supportive programs and amenities. So we've committed to doing all 14 plans currently to create this equitable effort. So here are the phases throughout the planning process. We are currently in phase 2, which runs through 2023. And this phase will ensure that future development supports communities' priorities by reviewing and refining place type designations in the 2040 policy map. We may also identify additional land use or design guidance needed for key locations. So we'll have 14 community area plans, like I mentioned, that's the outcome of this effort. These will include infrastructure recommendations, development concepts, supportive projects and programs, and an implementation strategy. The expectation is that city staff, appointed elected officials, and various others will use this in decision-making processes, such as future work programs, prioritization and budgeting, and development proposals. So with that, I'll also give a brief engagement update. As mentioned, we are kicking off phase 1, or we kicked off phase 1. So we want to provide an overview of what that actually entails. So many of you have seen this slide before as well. Our engagement strategy is broken into 3 different buckets, as we call them. So that's constant, coordinated, and collaborative. And there's a variety of tools in each bucket that we have utilized to spread the word and engage with the community. So this is what we're calling our constant bucket. As you see here, there are a variety of numbers, views, shares, comments, likes, things like that. The main message here at this point in the process is that this is our leading bucket. So the constant tools are exceeding our measures of success. We have a fairly high interaction of or number of interactions here. And a few things to note just related to these numbers. The website has a 30% return users rate, 7% engagement rate with our socials, and our goal was 5%. So we're seeing a higher engagement rate on our social media, and our views on YouTube are significantly exceeding what we had expected given the typical performance numbers on YouTube, the planning YouTube channel. And our newsletters are consistently being opened by more people than received, which leads us to believe that the newsletter is being read and shared by the community because they are sending it along. So the coordinated bucket is really just where we've been. It's the meetings that we've been hosting, the library office hours that we've been attending, and a variety of other meetings. So these numbers will be updated for October. We've since done a few workshops this month, but this is kind of where we've been throughout the geographies. And we have robust conversations. Our engagements, some of you have attended some of our meetings. Our engagement has been a little bit lower in terms of numbers and participation, but we are having really robust conversations. Another thing to note is that our virtual attendance is where we are seeing the most participation, which is consistent with the previous slide, in that our constant bucket and our constant method of engagement is really successful. So where are we going? This just outlines the upcoming workshops that we will be hosting throughout the fall. We've completed North Middle Outer, North Inner, and Northeast Middle and Outer, and we are moving on to Northeast Inner later this month. And then our collaborative bucket, these are just the variety of presentations that we have given to different appointed elected officials such as yourselves, as well as interdepartmental partners. So here we are just committing to constant updates and interactions with you all and others. And I'll turn it back over to Kathy.
Yeah, so that's a good overview of where we've been and where we are. And while we're finishing up or wrapping up phase 2, we're already planning for what we're going to do in phase 3. If you want to go next. So what we've talked about before and what we share with folks in the workshops is that phase 2 is really focused on updates to the policy map. And I know I've said this before, but there were a lot of inputs, and you all remember the methodology that was used to create the policy map, where we wanted to treat all circumstances throughout the community in the same manner. And we thought that, given that it was a gigantic effort to apply that over 350 or 30 square miles or whatever it is, we thought that there could be about 20% of areas that there needed to be, let's say, tweaks. Since with where we are in the process and kind of some of the work we've been doing, we really think that's more around 10%. So it's less than we thought, but and that is really what in each of the workshops, when we do the focus areas, those are the areas typically that we're talking about, in the type of situations or contexts or themes, all of those things. So that's that piece of it. In phase 3, we all know, and we've heard in the workshops, while we're talking mostly about mapping and land use, you can't really talk about that, or it's very hard to talk about that without talking about projects and programs, and folks do bring that up in the workshops. And we capture that information, and that's really helping us to plan for what we'll do in phase 3, which focuses on the projects and programs piece of it. So I do want to say that, as Aaron already mentioned this, the 3 buckets, the constant, coordinated, and collaborative. I do want to highlight that the workshop piece is really one engagement method that we have in one bucket. And as Aaron mentioned, you know, I've said this before, that there were a lot of bad things about COVID, but one thing that was good for us is that we really upped our game in that constant bucket. So we really have a robust set of tools that folks can use and are using in that. And we will continue to do that in future phases. So for our spring workshops, taking some of the lessons learned from this phase, where we were offering probably too many opportunities to meet in person, kind of like perhaps diluting the effort a little bit. It wasn't maybe the biggest bang for our buck. So what we're going to do in the next phase is group those smaller geographies into the cardinal areas. So you'll have a north geography, north, south, east, and west. They'll typically include 3 of the smaller geographies in each of them. The cardinal geographies are just for this phase. I do want to say that it's not something we're changing moving forward. We still have the 14, 15 planning areas, but the approach would be to offer 2 opportunities for each geography. So a virtual opportunity and an in-person opportunity. So if you do the math on that, that's 8 meetings. And we're thinking we can do that over a 2 to 3 month period. So looking at the spring, April through June. And it'll be organized that right now, when you come to our workshops, our partners are kind of around the periphery of the room. And the time for folks to interact with them is before to get any questions answered that aren't particularly the focus of the workshop. For example, we need a stop sign at this intersection. My garbage didn't get picked up. All of those kinds of questions, they can get answered in the meeting, even though that's kind of not the meat of the meeting. But our departments work on the policy map. That's the meat of the meeting. The next phase, talking about projects and programs, we're kind of flipping the script. And really the focus of the meeting is our partners, because we know that most of the projects and programs that we'll be discussing are not under planning's umbrella. They're under CDOT's umbrella or Parks and Rec or those. So those folks are really going to be the highlight of the meeting, or the main event of the meeting. So when I talk about how that'll be broken up, it's going to be a somewhat similar format in that we'll have an introductory presentation that our staff will provide. It'll probably be a similar video because that's a good way to make sure that everyone's getting the same information. But then we'll do, and this is all again, still in the planning stages. We'll break up into kind of stations that folks can circulate around at their leisure based on, they'll be grouped by the thematic areas or the themes that we're having that are coming out of the workshop. So mobilities, parks and open space, public services, and community character. And you can see some, but not all of the partners that fit under each of those buckets. And I will say that we've met with all of the partners to kind of introduce this effort. The end of last month, we had one day that we met with multiple folks in small groups over 6 hours. So the whole day was focused on just kind of getting everyone on board and answering questions and kind of outlining the strategy, et cetera. And we've continued to meet with other partners. We just had a meeting with another partner right before this meeting. Kind of the format would be for each of them. So each of those folks would have someone that would be able to describe and educate on any planned projects and programs that they have, then do some sort of facilitation around folks saying what's needed, what their wish list is, what programs they wish could be tweaked in one way or another, those sorts of things. And then it's really on us for the education piece on what are we doing with this information and how is it going to fold into the area plans. Timeframe, the interdepartmental buy-in is what we've been working on. And then October through January, we'll be working on development. We'll be doing that in concert with our partners. And that's one of the conversations we've been having with them, is the best way to do that, to best use their time. We'll have an online launch in March. We'll continue to do the logistics and the training like we do now. So before each meeting, so that folks know what's my role, what's my responsibility, what should I expect when I get there. And then kick off in April, and we expect it'll run through June with both that online and in-person opportunity. So as always, we've asked you all to continue to spread the news, especially, when we say spread the news, sometimes it's like if something happened and you go to someone and say, well, what can I do for you? And you're not offering anything specific. So here's a very specific ask is in that online constant bucket, we have an ambassador toolkit that has a bunch of materials that folks can submit. They can do it with their neighborhood organization, with their family, with their book club, however they want to do it, just on their own. There's a bunch of different things they can do. One thing that's very specific that might be helpful to know what can I do that will be used is images. We would love for folks to submit images of what they like about their area, what captures their neighborhood, all of those sorts of things. And we'd like to use those as part of the community area plans, because we normally do have photos and illustrations in there, and they're better if they come from the community. So that's a very specific ask that we have for you all. And that's kind of all Erin and I have. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. That was really informative. And I don't think we had heard as much about the next phase. So that's great to know. Did I understand properly that the intent is to have 8 meetings, and it's split up into 4 geographies, and I think we're 12 geographies now. Can you help me understand
Yeah,
the divide or the thinking or kind of what the plan is for that?
sure. So there's 14 geographies if you don't include the Uptown one. So the thinking is we'll group like 3 would make up the north, 3 would make up the east. I think one geography will have 4 in it. So grouping them in that way. And as always, folks are welcome to attend as many meetings as they want. Also, does that help?
It does, thanks. Is the thinking that the numbers have been maybe a little bit lower than you all would like, and that spreading it out over a longer geography or over wherever we are on this, I guess 13 times 3, so 39 different meetings is not the most efficient use of time? Is that kind of, I'm trying to.
It's 42
say it in a-
meetings.
Right, 42
And,
meetings, there you go. 42
And it's a
meetings
lot.
and
For the numbers that we've been getting. So, yes, and I do think that when you're talking about projects and programs, those kind of span larger area. They can be very specific, but some span larger areas. So I think that, and the other thing is that we are very dependent on our partners this time to have very key roles and responsibilities. And some of those folks there would be no way that they could staff up something that was 42 meetings.
thank you, that's very helpful.
Any other questions? Chairman, Alicia says no, so.
Got 2 minutes.
This question is for Alicia. Yeah. Just curious, Kathy, you said something about you guys were expecting about 20% of. Say that again, because
So
I thought I
in-
might disagree with you, but.
Yeah, in applying the methodology that we used, which
Uh-huh.
we had a number of inputs into, and honestly, in many online mapping efforts, if you go to Polaris or other things, there tends to be kind of a 20%. Error rate is not really the right term, but that's the only
Yeah,
thing I can use.
misclassification or something.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
might be
that's
it,
better. Deviation,
Deviation.
yes. So we're really finding that when we are doing research to find focus areas, and then we're discussing these with the community, that it's less than we thought it was significantly. And, I can't hold to like how I arrived at a 20% number. It's
Yeah, and I guess the thing that hit me about that was, and maybe it's where I'm coming from right now doing zoning, is, and I had this conversation in the parking lot last night about what people wanted to, this wasn't quite what I wanted. Could I get this over here and that sort of thing? And maybe it's again where I'm hearing it from, but I feel like we've had several of those in the last few months that. Last night there was one where it was like, yeah, you can't do what you used to do in this thing now that we're a new thing to do in. So they were going through a rezoning for that. A friend that has the church that you in one that he can't make kind of be a church kind of anymore, kind of, and stuff like that. So that's fine. If it's 10%, it's 10%. It's just less work for people to do, I guess, in the end. But that I was just surprised by that number. So, just a comment more than anything. And then I also got I saw you had one council session. Are you planning some more? Because somebody asked me about this last night.
yeah, well,
Or is it, I mean,
So it's 1 to full council.
okay,
Go to the transportation, the committees is also captured in that number.
okay.
We make regular updates to them. I think we have to understand too, because we have a whole council engagement schedule, and elected official, and we have to think about balancing the other priorities in the department and kind of what we take to them. So there's other ways that we are engaging with them and sharing information. They have a weekly email that we make sure that we put information on what happens once we send it, that's off. doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah, the
But we
person that
send it-
asked was not on tap or what used to
Right,
be tap.
right.
Okay.
And so we're strategic about when we go to full council, what are we sharing? Where are we in the process? And what do we want to, what critical path do we want to make sure that they understand we're taking if we engage them at that time? So we plan to go at the beginning of the year to the council retreat. And at that point, we would have done the whole first year. We have a lot to talk about and to inform the new members about what this is, what's important, what's their role, what we've heard, what to expect. Anytime before that, we just be repeating, hey, here's the project. And then they might get a little frustrated, but we make sure that we have a consistent touch point with the committee, with you all. And we hope that you're talking to them as well.
Like
That's
I
the
say,
other-
yeah, I
That's
mean,
the other touch point.
it came up last night in a conversation and I'll talk to you about it a little bit afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's why when I saw that one, but I didn't think about the fact that,
Yeah.
you know,
of
okay.
the committee. And then, you know, council's really focused on at right now, because the UDO just became effective in June. There's a lot of conversations around what that is and what that looks like. And so when we talk to them, we make sure we're talking about, hey, here's UDO implementation, but we're also working on community area planning, ... It may not be the primary agenda item, but we're still making sure that they understand that this other process is happening and how to plug in.
Thanks a bunch.
Any other questions? Quickly, and I told you guys I'd keep you past 5:20 from now on. Covered, so no one can complain. You knew this was coming. Just quickly, I had the privilege of attending the Northeast Middle and Outer Tuesday digital or virtual, excuse me, and then Thursday in-person meetings. You know, several people here have been to these before. A couple people likely have not. And so just a quick update for everyone, and then we can all get out of here. But we had 3 kind of touch areas that we addressed. You know, it was the intersection of W.T. Harris and the Plaza, the intersection of North Tryon and Old Concord, and the intersection of Rocky River Road at 485. And the conversations revolved largely around what the community wanted to see in terms of future growth and development, or frankly, lack thereof, right? So I was really, you know, pleasantly surprised at some of the conversation there. Again, we had probably 8 or 9 people virtually, close to a dozen in person on Thursday. So maybe I was just the benefactor of good timing, right? The beneficiary of good timing. A couple of things that I just, again, for everyone here that really struck me. One, there was a lot of focus on walkability, but also a general awareness that it's going to be hard to make roads like W.T. Harris walkable in the immediate future, where you have 6 lanes and people are flying. So on that, you know, to that point, there was a lot of conversation about the safety there. I will say in general, there was a preference towards density and towards some of these denser place types, with a focus on creating sustainable employment and services for those communities. You know, I think that for the most part, the virtual meeting was very cordial. On Thursday in person, there was a little bit, it was not contentious isn't the right word, you know, because it was a little more talking to people, you know, and I will, I do want to take a second to commend Kathy. Kathy was like Wonder Woman out there. Her ability to corral people's thoughts, questions, relevant, irrelevant, and keep the conversation on topic and moving in the right direction was incredible. I think that only 2 things. One is, while we focused on those 3 intersections, literally, I think the first comment on Thursday was like, well, what if we want to talk about somewhere else? I was like, well, so remind people, as we have our community conversations, please remind people that there is a map where they can go in and online, where they can go in and put a point to make a comment about anywhere in the city, right? So even if in our community area planning meetings, we kind of have our focus areas, if they want to have you know, to create conversation around somewhere else, that's largely the best way to do it. The other thing, we need to continue to support staff and remind people that as much as sometimes we wish they were, the city of Charlotte is not a developer, nor are they a landlord. So while we can create the place types in certain areas to try and foster the types of communities that we want to see, Kathy and Alicia aren't calling the CEO of Honeywell and telling them to go to Old Concord and Old Road, right? And again, I understand that community members want to see certain things, certain places. We need to make sure that there's a certain amount of level setting and that we can only do what we can do, which is to try and create the environment for that to happen, but we cannot force that to happen because again, it's just managing expectations. And again, Kathy did a fantastic job of that. These were my first area planning meetings that I attended. And as we all do those, please keep that in mind. Quick reminder, Commissioner Shaw, I believe you and Will Russell are handling the Northeast Inter for us. That training is Thursday here at 1 o'clock down in the basement. I'll send an email around as well. Currently, we do have all open spots for the East, Middle, and Outer. Those meetings are the November 7th, 9th, and 11th, that Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The training is that Thursday before on the 2nd. So again, being cognizant of time, I'll send an email, but we do not have any commitments. I unfortunately am out of town for the training, but I'll send something around on that. On that note, anything else for the good of the order, or would everybody like to go home and have dinner? Well, maybe you already had dinner. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
No, your motion.
Motion to adjourn. Sorry, motion
Second.
to adjourn.
Second.
All right, thank you, everybody.